to share two memories that stand out the most when I reflect back on my time playing baseball as a kid. The first one was one of those nights that probably seemed normal at the time, but looking back, it's just like a scene from a movie. It was a game we started playing probably around sunset, and at some point the ballpark lights turned on. And you got this scene out in the outfield of just a purple and pink sky on the horizon. The lights are on, the bugs are all buzzing around the lights. Parents are out in the stands, sitting in camping chairs or laid out on blankets. And, there's little kids that aren't, probably siblings of the players on the field and just running around playing tag. The snack shack is all abuzz with people ordering nachos and calling out orders. And, people are just chewing sunflower seeds and it's warm and it's just a perfect night for baseball. And if you've ever been to a Little League field of any kind, you've probably had a really similar experience. And so my team is losing and pretty bad. But towards the end of the game, they had to switch out the other team's pitcher. And things started to go in our favor after that. We started getting some hits and some runs, and we're starting to claw back. Now, I'm not the best player on the team. I don't think I was the worst, but I'm not like the star player by any means. But I'm somewhere at the bottom of the lineup this game. And last inning rolls around, and the new pitcher is still kind of struggling, just walk after walk, and it's getting kind of bad now. And so my spot's coming up in the lineup, and, it's the last inning. We're down by a run, and I find myself at the plate with the bases loaded. This pitcher had just walked the bases full. And we're down by one, and I'm kind of in that spot that you dream of as a kid of, bottom of the ninth inning, bases loaded, you're down, you can win the whole game, with a home run, that type of thing. And so I'm in that spot. And now, like I said, this game wasn't anything huge. It's just a regular season game. It's no playoff indication or championship or anything like that. But still, it's a big moment, probably the biggest moment that I had been in. And like I said, I'm 13, 14 years old at the time. Well, behind the plate was our umpire named Joe. Now, Joe had probably umped every home game of my Little League career. I mean, he was a fixture at the ballpark. I think he ended up umpiring for like 30 years by the time he retired. And Joe was a great umpire. He knew what he was doing. And good or bad, you could always rely on him to be there to make the call. I think when he finally retired, it was like 30 years of umpiring for Little League, for Pony, Babe Ruth, high school ball, I'm sure. And he knew what he was doing. He was definitely experienced. And I think after he passed away, they named the field after him. But anyways, Joe is behind the plate, and I'm up to bat, have a chance to keep the game going and maybe even win the game for my team. So I can't remember the sequence of pitches, but I know that the pitcher definitely threw me some balls that weren't even close, and then threw some balls that I just took giant hacks at that I had no business swinging at, and eventually worked myself into a full count. And after one of those wild swings that I took at a ball I probably shouldn't have swung at, I remember the third base coach just kind of making eye contact with me like, come on, bud, like you saw the two guys ahead of you, get walked, and you have no business swinging at any of those pitches. And so, like I said, I wasn't the best, I wasn't the worst, but I felt like, I could possibly win the game. And so it was a full count. Pitcher wound up, threw the ball. It was one of those that started off from my eye bad, like I knew it was going to be a take, and I would get the walk, and we would walk in that tying run. But kind of halfway through, it looked like maybe it was closer than I expected to the strike zone. So I remember just kind of being frozen there at the plate, waiting my fate from Joe. And what do I hear? Strike three, batter's out. And it just crushed me. Of course, the opposing team, celebrates, jumps off the field. They're having a great time. My teammates are walking from the base path, just kind of sulking back into the dugout. And I'm just standing there with the bat on my shoulder, just devastated in the moment. That pit in my stomach, I can still feel. And even though it wasn't a important game, and it was an important moment for me. I don't remember what my teammates told me after I walked off the field. I don't remember if my coach told me anything. I'm sure my parents told me, like, you'll get them next time or something like that. But I don't remember anything specifically that they said. But I remember sitting in the back seat of the van on the way home and just that feeling in my stomach of like, I failed and it sucks. And I think that was the first time I felt it in a real kind of way. I mean, baseball is a game of failure. You strike out just as much as you get a hit or get on base, it seems like, even in the major leagues. But for me, it was a big moment of kind of coming to grips with what it feels like when you are in a position to do something and you don't succeed. And that has stayed with me for a long time. Now, contrast that to this other story, which I wish I had more details about, but all I remember is it was a night game. Again, I don't know if there was any significance. I don't think there was to this game in particular. Don't remember who we were playing. I was up to bat though, and couldn't tell you if there was people on base. I knew my jersey color was green, but the pitcher wound up, threw the ball, and I connected with that pitch in a way that I have never connected with a baseball in my life to that point, and probably never since. I must have got both cheeks into that thing, hit it on the sweet spot of the bat, and I just remember it sailing into the night sky down the left field line, and I bolted to first base. Now, I'd hit balls before that maybe one or two hopped into the fence, but nothing like this. And probably right around the time I was getting to first base and rounding that corner to second, I saw it clear the left field fence, and my heart just exploded. Now, I mean, that fence was probably 180, 200 feet. It was a little league field. But in my mind, I had just blasted that thing like 350 feet to left field. And I was like hyperventilating. I mean, I had tears filling my eyes. And I just felt like my heart was in my throat. And I remember I was running around the bases probably faster than I needed to. I never hit a home run before. It was my one and only. And home runs were uncommon in my league. Like maybe one or two a season you'd see. And so this was a big deal for me and for the team, for everyone watching. And I was just hustling around the bases. I probably could have done like a little home run trot, but I was just so amped up. And I got back to the dugout. Thankfully, after touching all the bases, I was always worried that I was going to miss a base after hitting a home run. And high fives from coach, from all my teammates. And, my parents were there, gave them a hug. And my brothers were actually at the game, my younger brothers, and they ran out and got the ball and brought it back. And it was just this experience that I will never forget. In contrast to like that failure, this was probably the biggest personal success I'd ever had on a ball field. And it felt amazing. I was on cloud nine forever. I had that ball in my room. I think I dated it and signed it, and eventually, it was just a ball after a while. We played catch with it, and it probably got lost at some point. But it meant so much to me because I wasn't the star player, but that day in that moment, I came out on top in a big way, and I'll never forget that. So I share those stories to kind of give context for what I want to talk about today, and that is the value there is in youth sports, and perhaps the unseen value there is in youth sports. When a school district faces budget issues, one of the first things they want to cut is sports programs. And I mean, I understand, education versus athletics, what is more important? I mean, it could be open for debate, but even as someone that loves sports, I would say we probably should prioritize our kids' education. But why do I think it should at least be a debate? It's because youth sports give kids the opportunity to experience what I experienced: success and failure in a context that is safe and in a context that isn't going to have severe consequences. I mean, me striking out isn't going to be a life-altering event. Me experiencing success isn't going to change the course of my life forever. But in the context of sports, you get to experience those things daily and learn from them, to learn what it takes to be successful. The effort, the time, the discipline, the skill that needs to be developed in order to be good. And then you also learn the flip side of failure. And you have to know what it feels like to be struck out, to be in a moment to where you could do something great and you fall short. And, I talk about baseball, but you can apply this to any sport really, whether it's team or, an individual sport like wrestling or jujitsu or gymnastics or even dance. Anything that requires effort or overcoming some type of difficulty, I think is more valuable than we give it credit for, especially for our kids. And why is that? Well, I think as a culture in the US, we shift towards avoiding discomfort. I think we want to move towards the path of least resistance, that if something requires less effort, that's what we want to do. That's what we value. If it takes, time, or if it's painful, or if it's we're going to require work on our part, it's kind of hard for us to want to do that. And so we see that in our society with, moving more towards convenience and things being automated for us, whatever, keeps us from having to do more work than what we think is necessary, which I'm not complaining about. And I mean, I use in my, I love convenience. Every time we go to the lower 48, it's great to have everything at your fingertips. But what is the trade-off? And what is the trade-off for our kids? Because I think if you look at the generations, did I have it worse off than my kids? I don't know. But I know that my parents probably lived in a much different time, especially without as much technology. And even my great-great-grandparents, it's like a whole different world. And kids grew up in a society that wasn't that similar to what we have now, especially with technology. And hard work was a priority back then, and not even a priority, but a necessity. Like if you didn't put in the work, then you weren't going to eat, or if you didn't, go out and get a job, or depending on the lifestyle, like if you had animals or things to take care of, like I'm thinking more like farm life type stuff. Like the kids were very much involved in that and had opportunity to experience what hard work was, what it was like to get dirty, and to put in time and effort to accomplish something, out of necessity. Well, now is the necessity really there for our kids? We live in a time where basically you can have most of your needs met. And I know that there are people out there that don't, or have more difficulty in doing so, but just across the board, I think that the opportunity is there for kids to avoid difficulty and avoid discomfort, probably more than ever. So coming back to youth sports, what do we have? We still have the opportunity for kids to experience something that is difficult, but they're learning what it takes to become successful, or they're learning what it feels like to go through failure, shortcoming, things like that. And I think there's a lot of value in that because it builds in us resilience. And we, in a time where we are shifting more and more towards convenience and avoiding discomfort, I think we need to still preserve resiliency in us in whatever way we can. So it might not be through sports for you. Maybe you have your kids, do difficult things in a context through your home life, whether that's chores or, teaching them things in the outdoors. So I don't want to take away from, maybe something you're doing as a parent that you are aware of to build that resiliency in your kids. What I'm trying to get at is to not sleep on the fact that youth sports has a place in our schools, in our society, and that it has tremendous value in building resiliency in our kids. It's always frustrating to me when a parent tells me, well, I don't do sports for my kids, or I don't get my kids involved in youth sports because there's no chance that they're going to make it to the big time, to the big leagues, the professional level. And that is so far from the point. Youth sports is there because it gives us an opportunity as parents to place our kids in a safe environment that is going to be challenging, that we can help them along in overcoming something that is hard. And I think that is what I'm getting at, is that kids need to do hard things and not be rescued from them. Kids need to do hard things and not be rescued from them anytime it gets difficult. So is that harsh? Is that a harsh statement? I don't know. I think in the context of what I'm discussing today with sports, I don't think it's like, your kid's not going to be traumatized by getting signed up for Little League Baseball, or by, you putting them in soccer or basketball or jiu-jitsu or whatever it is. You're just allowing an opportunity for them to grow in a way that you might not be able to facilitate as a parent at home otherwise. Again, my opinion. But what I'll say is that I did read this book. It's called The Comfort Crisis. It's by Michael Easter. I read this book last year, and it really stuck with me, because he talks about this concept of discomfort and how in our society's pursuit of convenience and avoiding discomfort, we lose the value of the struggle. And when we lose the struggle, we become less resilient, because now we don't know what to do when faced with difficult circumstances. And so this book is great, especially for an Alaskan. I think you should read it. He talks about going out into the wilderness here in our state and just being totally unplugged and disconnected with a couple of other hunters for, I think it was like weeks at a time, and they were just following this caribou herd, and just his experience through that, how difficult it was. But through that, he talks about something he calls misogi, which is a annual thing that he does where he intentionally puts himself in a difficult situation that pushes him to the edge, to where his success is not guaranteed, basically. And the type of resilience that builds in him, and how every year he builds upon that, and he realizes that he's able to do harder and harder things because of the experiences that he's had before then. Do I think you need to go send your kids out in the woods, by themselves, for this misogi experience? No, that's not what I'm getting at all. But what I'm saying is that in the context of sports, I feel like that could be the same thing, because if you have a kid that is not athletic, or maybe they are athletic, and you put them in a sport, it will challenge them. I guarantee it'll challenge them. And then so what are they going to do after that first practice? They're going to say, it's hard. I'm not good. The other kids are better. And then what are you going to do as a parent? You have a choice. You can be encouraging in their decision of like, yeah, you know what, Tommy, that's too hard for you. Let's go find something else. But the chances are you're probably going to find something else that's going to be challenging in a different way. Or you can work through that with them, navigate those thoughts and those feelings with them, and then help them realize what it takes to improve, to get better, to overcome whatever the challenge is that they're concerned about. And again, this will vary from sport to sport, activity to activity, but what does it do for you as a parent? Well, it brings you closer to your kid, because now your kid is experiencing a challenge that is separate to you, and you're able to help them through it and help them understand how to get through it and to improve, or how to deal with all the emotions that come along with it. And I think that is just invaluable when we can intentionally do that with our kids. Because what is the flip side? Our kids deal with trauma all the time. I mean, trauma is a huge word out there right now when it comes to parenting. And if you're sitting across, the couch from a therapist, a psychologist, because kids go through trauma that was unintended consequences of relationships with their parents, things that happened through divorce, through abuse, through situations that were maybe outside of their control. Like that stuff, unfortunately, is going to rear its head at some point in your life. I'm not just speaking for kids, but just for any human being. You're going to face some kind of adversity that you weren't expecting, and that was outside of maybe it was outside of your control. Not always, but that you didn't bank on happening. And to be able to work with the kid, your own kid, in something that's challenging, but it's in a safe environment. It's not going to, change their life forever, but you're going to be able to put together the pieces of, or at least explain the foundation of how to be successful, or what to do when you face hard things, I think is huge, because that's going to be with them for the rest of their life. So that being said, huge advocate for sports. The other thing is when your kid experiences something that they want to quit, but you tell them to keep going. I remember I signed up or I showed interest in playing Pop Warner football when I was in middle school, I think. And my parents told me, if you sign up to play, like you're going to play the whole season. That was the rule. Was that if we do a sport, like, you're doing the sport. There is no quitting. Well, I liked the idea of playing football, and then I got clocked for the first time and was like, oof, maybe contact sports are not my thing. Tell my parents this, and they're like, sorry, bud, like, you signed up for it. And then all the running, I hated running, and we did so much running, and I was so exhausted and so tired. And I would complain to my parents about that, not wanting to go to practice. They made me go to every practice. And I remember telling them, I think it was my mom, we were driving home from a practice one day, and I voiced, like, I hate going to practice, but what I feel after practice is so good. And as a kid, as a middle schooler, like, that was my only frame of reference, was that this thing sucks, but after I do it, I feel better because it was hard and I made it through the end of it. Like, you go in thinking, you're going into this 2-hour practice and it's going to be hot, and you're going to have to run, and people are going to hit you, and you're going to have to try to tackle other kids, and it's hard. But then you survive the 2 hours, and then you're like, you get that, like, runner's high, and you're like, oh, this is awesome, I did it. And you just can't beat that feeling. I wouldn't have got that if my parents were like, yeah, you can quit, just be done. Because then I don't know what I would have done if I would have pursued sports, or if I would just be, if something's hard, okay, I'm just not going to do it. And it overflows into everything with school, especially. If something is difficult, it doesn't mean that, you don't have to learn how to read. It means you maybe have to work harder at it, or you need it to be presented to you in a different way, or learn it a different way. It makes you get creative on how you approach something that's hard. And I'm thankful that my parents held me to that standard, and it's something that I'm going to hold to my kids as well. My daughter is running track right now, and I hate running. I went through a time in my life where I did it and liked long distance stuff, but I'm not strong. I'm not a strong runner. I'm not very fast. I can run long distances, but I'm not going to like it. I'll be, like, in my own head complaining about it the whole time. But I'm watching my daughter do track, and it's funny. So she's in 6th grade now. I remember in kindergarten, she was part of a running club in North Pole. And I remember they had to run like a mile. I think it was like a mile that they had to do. And this was outside in the fall. So it's not, probably like 40 degrees, 35 degrees, something like that. And I remember part of the track, there was a hill. And I remember Bella running that hill and knowing that she'd already been running for a while, and that for me, a mile for a kindergartner seems like a freaking ultra marathon, which she proved me wrong. She ran the whole time, didn't stop. And when she's running up that hill, she's just like slow and steady, like just, step after step, was not going to stop. Other kids were walking, and she just powered through. And I remember feeling so full of emotion watching that, because my kid was doing something hard. I couldn't save her from it, but she was doing it. And she finished that race. I remember just being so happy. And I think me and Angie, my wife, have a picture of the three of us at the finish line. And she is just ear to ear smiling. Cheeks beat red because she's really light skinned. But she did it. She ran the whole thing. And so now she's in track, and she's doing like the 400 and 800, which are like longer distance races. She's not the fastest. She's not the slowest, but she's doing it. And she complains about practice and how hard it is, but she's still doing it. And so I know that in her heart, in her mind, she's those wheels are turning. If something is difficult, but I have what it takes to be successful and to finish it. And you just can't beat that. Building that resilience in your kids. So what else does youth sports bring to the table? Well, I think regardless of whatever sport you or your kid pick, I think the game reveals the parent. The game reveals the parent. And what do I mean by that? I've coached Little League for 5 years. I started with Jack in T-ball, and I am now in the 7 and 8 year old division with machine pitch. I have come across parents that I've known outside of baseball that were pretty cool and easygoing, and then once their kid was on the field, something snaps in them, and they are like yelling and getting upset and like an anger comes out, and it's like they're a different person. And why is that? I don't know. I think it's good to be competitive. I'm not saying like don't compete. I think there is a certain drive or determination that's necessary in sports, but there is a balance of the way that you deal with your kid in that, to what is driving them to be better, and then what values are you driving. So when things go wrong, so for example, your kid strikes out, what do you model? Do you yell at them and shame them, or do you offer constructive criticism? Do you give them feedback? So when you get your kid involved in a sport, you are putting your parenting style on display, like it or not. And it's hard. Why we're like this, I don't know. But I think some of us react to how our kids perform out of fear. Some of us react out of like blown out expectations on where we think they should be versus where they are. I don't know, but I have seen parents kind of flip a switch and they become a different person when their kid is on the field, on the ice, whatever it is. And it really puts into perspective how we model adversity, how we model struggle, because it's uncomfortable to see your kid strike out over and over and over again. It's hard to see your kid, miss a routine, shot, or miss some routine play, or fail at some routine play. And in those moments, your kid is dealing with that, and then you have to identify as a parent how you are going to interact with that in a way that's going to be positive, or at least I'm encouraging that. Because stereotypically, what do I see? Parents yelling from the stands, sometimes encouraging, sometimes not, on what their kids should be doing. Sometimes, unfortunately, other parents yelling at kids on what they should be doing or not doing in a situation. And so now, the parents are in the spotlight when it comes to youth sports. And so how do we deal with that? I'll give you an example. So my son Jack plays baseball, and I would say Jack is pretty good. Like Jack, for me being a pretty mediocre player, Jack is, way above where I was at his age. And he loves the game, and I'm not hard on him, but I strategically give my criticism. For example, last year we're playing, and Jack is playing first base, and kid hits the ball, a slow roller to him, which we have done countless times, where he can field the ball, tag his base, and get the out. And so the play happens, the kid hits it, it rolls to him right under his glove, and behind him, the kid gets to first base. And in that moment, I'm let down because I know he can make that play. He knows he can make that play. So what is better for me in that moment? Do I yell at him? Hey, you need to make that play. You're better than that. Is there a constructive point to that statement? Probably not. He knows that. He knows he can make that play. I think of, this hasn't happened to me yet because our kids don't, it's not player pitch yet. It's just a pitching machine. But when parents yell from the stands, throw strikes, it's like, he's trying to throw strikes, or she's trying to throw strikes. Like, there's no question about that. But I don't know, maybe as parents, we feel like it's our job to make those statements. That somehow that's going to be what gets through, and it's going to, fix whatever problem they're having. I'm not a believer in that. You'll never hear me screaming from the stands, on what my kids should be doing. So what do I do instead? Well, I wait for the car ride home. The car ride home, if you've been a parent in sports, is like the confessional. It's either where the parents, lay into the kids about a game, or the opposite is they're just quiet about it and wait for the kids to talk about it. And then you have your opportunity to build on whatever experience they had, good or bad. So the way it usually goes with Jack is I always highlight something good in the game that he did, that he knows he did, whether it was a hit or a catch or a play. We talk about that. I do not talk about the bad things, but my son cares enough about the game that he ends up bringing it up on his own. And it's not always right after the game. Sometimes it's when we're playing catch in the backyard and he misses a catch or ball goes under, between his legs, and he'll say, "Remember when that happened at, the last game or that one game?" And then we talk about it, because now he's bringing it up as something that he knows that he needs to do to get better. And it gives me the opportunity to be like, here's exactly what I wanted to say then, but we can break it down and do it in a constructive way right now, to where you're not going to be upset about it or ashamed or feel called out or anything like that, but you're in a mindset now to build off of your mistake. And I try to be present for those opportunities. And that's really the other part of it, is you have to make time for those conversations to happen. Jack loves to play catch, and there's times where I can go and we can play catch for hours, because he'll never say he's done and wants to come inside. And there's times where I have to tell him no, but I'm always aware of my time with my kids. I think that we try to love our kids by providing for them, which I think is great, and we should. But, I think as parents, we do have a lot of things going on. We got a lot of fires burning. We're trying to, be able to provide for our kids. We, work jobs to make money, to pay bills, so that, we can have shelter, have, gas in the car, to be able to, eat and enjoy things, to work towards different goals that we have as a family, whatever that is. And I feel the responsibility to work hard at that. But sometimes those things can start to be prioritized over the time that I have with my kids. And more I've become aware of that. I work 12-hour days, and those are hard because, I have minutes with my kids before I leave to work in the morning, and I have minutes with my kids when I come home in the evening. And, I start adding up time that I spent with them and what that time actually consisted of, and it gets a little depressing. So always being aware of that, I have to intentionally look at my week, look at my calendar, and say, okay, when am I going to have time to be able to spend time with Jack? When am I going to have time to be able to hang out with Bella? Because it only gets harder as they become more busy, and even sports added into it. Like now they're, for me, I coach Jack's team, so at least we get to spend time, together on the ballpark, at the ballpark when I'm coaching. But if he's involved, like he did indoor soccer this winter and basketball, like I'm not coaching that team. So, he's doing stuff and I'm at his game, but we're not really spending quality time together. But what I'm getting at is be aware of the time that you're spending with your kids that is meaningful, that's valuable. And it varies from kid to kid. I could tell you that there's things that my daughter wants to do together that my son doesn't really care about. Bella is a snuggler. She wants to just be close to me at some point during the day and either watch a funny show or to play video games together. She just wants to be like in close proximity, knowing that we're like connected and that I love her. My son, he wants to go and he wants to do stuff. He wants to go outside, play catch, run around, work on a project together. He wants to be doing something active with me. And so every kid's different, but I am always aware of the, I guess me and my wife call it the love bank. Like how much are we depositing into that bank to where they're feeling loved? And I think being aware of that love bank is super important. And, at the end of the day, your influence in your kids' lives is more important to whatever feedback you have for them. It's being there over perfection, your presence over perfection. I've heard it called that before. Like if you're there for your kids, it's going to mean the world to them. And that's just the first step, is putting yourself in a position that they know that you are there for them. So we've talked about, how it's important for our kids to be given the opportunity to experience discomfort, not be rescued from it, to do hard things. We've talked about what letting our kids do hard things reveals in us as parents. And the last thing I want to talk about is how we shouldn't try to adjust the challenge to make it easier for our kids. So what do I mean by that? Going back to baseball, home plate is 17 inches across. Whether you're in T-ball or you're in Major League Baseball, it is 17 inches across. So what does that mean? It means that in order to throw a strike, you have to throw it in a certain, pitcher has to make sure the ball crosses the plate within those 17 inches in order for it to be a strike, from the knees to the elbows of the batter. It doesn't change. It's the same, no matter if you're a T-baller or a big leaguer. That's how big it is. It doesn't adjust based on your size or your skill. It is what it is. The distance that you throw from home plate does vary from 45 to 60 feet or whatever, but the standard doesn't change. So what does that mean in regards of, what does that mean in this context? Well, thinking back to my failure story, Joe was looking at the home plate as the plate umpire. Maybe that ball crossed the plate, maybe it didn't. Knowing Joe and his experience, I would say more than likely it was probably a strike. Could he have adjusted the strike zone for me in that situation? Sure. But then what value do I get out of that scenario? I would have walked in a run, but I guarantee I would have forgot that situation. No one's going to remember the time where, you walked in a run and won the game. Like, that's kind of a lame memory, something you'd probably forget, at least in that game that I was playing that day. But having gone through the standard, or having gone through that experience being held to the standard, it forced me to get better. It forced me to improve, to be more aware of my own skill, my own ability, and it made me want to be a better baseball player. If Joe would have adjusted the strike zone for me, I wouldn't have learned that lesson. And I think the same is true for us and our kids. Don't make the game easier so that they can succeed. Guide them through how to get better, how to adjust, how to improve, and the steps that it takes to get there. And what does that require of us? It requires time and effort and intentionality, and that's not easy when we're already busy, when we already feel like we're stretched, when we're already exhausted, and you just want to be alone, or you want to do your own thing. But we only have so much time with our kids at home when they're under our roof, and we're raising. These kids we're raising are not houseplants. They require a gardener. They require pruning. They require us to pay attention to their growth and how they're looking. And we only get to do that for so long until they, are on their own. And again, I'm very aware of that with my two kids. And I'm not perfect. I'm not a perfect dad. I fall short all the time with them, with my spouse. And what do I do, though? I get back up. I keep trying. I apologize. I learn from my mistakes. And I think that's the best we can do. And I think if we can do that as adults and we can model that for our kids, the better off they'll be. And coming back to baseball, you got to keep stepping in the box. And more than I want my kids to hit home runs, I want them to keep showing up, stepping to the plate, and taking the at-bat and giving it their best shot. And whether they're successful or whether they fail, I want them to keep showing up. I want to hold that standard to myself, and I want my kids to be able to do that too, because I think it'll set them up for success as they get older. So I'm not really sure what this episode was about, but I hope that if you're on the fence with getting your kids involved in sports, that maybe this changed your mind a little bit, and you would look for something that maybe your kid shows interest in, and encourage them to give it a shot, and then hold them to that standard so that when it gets difficult, when things get hard, they'll have that opportunity to experience, some discomfort and then come out on top. Or if you're waist deep in kids sports and this is all old news to you, I want to hear from you. What lessons have you learned that have applied to your kids' lives in a meaningful way? What experiences have you had, or things that you've seen that apply to just real life? I'd love to hear from you. I appreciate you guys sticking with me on this solo episode. It's not my favorite to just sit here and ramble, but I do like to talk about stuff every now and then. And it is the state I am in right now, considering we're moving into Little League season, and I'll be coaching. If you want to check out this book, The Comfort Crisis, it's by Michael Easter. You can find it everywhere. It's on Amazon, in most bookstores. It's been around for a few years. It is a very, very good read, and I would highly suggest it if anything I said today was interesting at all. So until next time, everyone, take care.